So you have visited the Gaza Strip several times after October 7th. How does Gaza look like?
Gaza is what I think President Trump described as a demolition site. A huge amount of Gaza has been destroyed. There are relatively few buildings still standing. There's devastation pretty much everywhere. And the reason for that is it's not been gratuitous destruction by Israel. The reason for it is that in a huge majority of houses, mosques, schools, other buildings have been used as military locations by Hamas. Now that ranges from using them as command posts, using it for weapons storage, and a range of other activities. And literally, in some places, every other house, in some cases every house, has got weapons in it. Rocket launchers, grenades, explosives, rifles. And it enables the Hamas terrorists to move around above ground, obviously dressed as civilians, among the civilian population, without carrying weapons. They can move around, and without weapons, who knows whether they're terrorists or not? And then they can go into a house, and they know where the weapons are, take the weapons, attack the IDF, leave the weapons, move on. And so that has led to the destruction. You might say, well, why has the IDF not gone into the houses and just got the weapons? Well, many of these houses are booby-trapped, and they've got very sophisticated explosive devices in the walls, in the floors, in the furniture, covered by cameras sometimes. So the IDF can go in there, somebody watching the camera, press a button, kills the soldiers. So why would you do that if you can destroy them, which is unfortunate, but it's the only way. And many other houses, huge number of buildings in Gaza, have got tunnel entrances in them. And again, these tunnel entrances are booby-trapped. And the best way to deal with them is probably to destroy the house or the building that they're in. So you've got a lot of destruction. I've been into houses inside Gaza, and I've seen rifles under children's beds, rocket launchers in the cupboard in the kitchen, boxes of grenades in the sitting room, things like this. So all this has led to a very, very terrible situation in Gaza.
Let's say that we are IDF soldiers. We have to fight in the Gaza Strip. How can we decide if someone who is coming is a terrorist or just a simple civil?
Well, the IDF have got very, very good intelligence inside Gaza, and that intelligence has grown in sophistication since this war began. And that obviously includes human sources inside Gaza, and it includes technical intelligence, monitoring phones, monitoring other forms of communication, and aerial surveillance from drones and from various other platforms. So you can identify some of the terrorists through intelligence. They also have, in many cases, they have facial recognition software and equipment, so you can identify individuals. But if those different techniques don't apply, then the only way you can really tell a terrorist is if he's shooting at you or if he's carrying a weapon. And as I mentioned before, they don't really need to carry weapons around because they can get them from a house. So it's very tough. And of course, the terrorists are right among the civilian population. There's no kind of separation between terrorists and civilians, and they will prefer to attack the IDF when there are plenty of civilians around. And that has two purposes, of course. One, if the IDF identify somebody firing at them, then they hope it will deter the IDF from shooting in case they kill civilians. And secondly, which probably is even more beneficial to Hamas, is that if the terrorist is identified and the IDF shoot and kill civilians, that's a bonus for Hamas. They want their civilian population dead. The same applies with airstrikes against terrorists. The terrorists, the leaders in particular, will almost invariably be surrounded by their families, by other civilians, so that if Israel does take them out, then civilians are going to die as well. That's exactly what they want to happen. They want their own civilian population to die so that they can vilify Israel, isolate Israel, get Israel condemned on the world stage.
Yeah, and if I remember it correctly, the mainstream media says that there are more than 60,000 people have died since October. What could be the real number? Because this number is from Hamas. And what could be the terrorist-civilian ratio?
Well, if you take that 60,000, which changes all the time, and as you said, these are Hamas figures, so we don't know what the reality is. Nobody knows. And organizations like the United Nations and many media organizations just parrot the Hamas figures. So, but we don't know. Let's assume they're roughly correct. Let's assume that. I'm not saying they are. The IDF estimate, I think, that they don't put out kind of regular information about how many terrorists they've killed. But the latest I've seen is somewhere around 20 to 30,000, or maybe even more terrorists have been killed by the IDF, which means that you've got if this total of 60,000 is correct, and let's say 30,000 terrorists have been killed, that would give you a ratio of one civilian killed to every terrorist. But actually, the likelihood is that number of civilians killed by the IDF is going to be reduced because in a population of 2 million, many, many people will die of natural causes unconnected with the war, a large number. And many people have been killed by Hamas deliberately or unintentionally, by rockets falling short or by executions, torture to death, etc., which huge number of Gazans have been killed by Hamas themselves. So in my view, it gives a ratio of around 1-to-1, one civilian to one terrorist, or probably less. But who knows? And Israel is condemned for that, for committing war crimes by killing an unnecessary number of civilians, which I don't believe is true. I've seen the IDF in action. I've seen the steps they take to minimize the deaths of innocent civilians, including by dropping leaflets on areas they're going to attack on, making phone calls, voice messages, text messages, a range of other systems they use to try and get civilians out of the way if they're going to carry out an attack. But even if you forget that, let's say it's 1-to-1. If you compare that to other conflicts, let's take Afghanistan, the ratio the Americans estimate that their troops killed in Afghanistan was 5 civilians to every combatant. If you take Iraq, it's 3 civilians to every combatant. And the United Nations issued a report a few years ago suggesting that 9 civilians have been killed for every combatant in conflicts around the world of this type since the Second World War. So a ratio of somewhere around 1-to-1, terrible though it is, I think demonstrates how careful the Israelis have been in this situation where Hamas want them to kill their civilians and put them into situations where they have often little choice. I think it shows the effectiveness of the Israeli tactics, and it's the exact opposite of what so many people around the world pretend is the case.
But then why the word condemns Israel? Because it's like, if you look at the UN, and they condemned Israel last year 15 times maybe, and condemned every other countries 13 times. So why?
And that's not just in the last year. The same kind of levels, the same condemnation of Israel is applied in the United Nations for many years, far disproportionate to the reality. You're looking at other conflicts around the world. There's far more reason to condemn countries other than Israel, but they're basically brushed aside. The reason why is actually relatively straightforward, but little understood. Essentially, Israel has been painted as a country that illegally stole Palestinian land, It illegally occupies Palestinian land. It's got illegal settlers. It practices apartheid. It commits genocide. All of these things, all of them, including the suggestion of illegal occupation, are lies. They're all lies. And the whole thing, this whole framework, this whole narrative was developed in the 1960s by the Soviet Union. And they predominantly used Romania as their main tool to build up this narrative against Israel. And it was done because the Soviet Union wanted to harm US and UK interests in the Middle East. They were the two main powers in the Middle East then. And they wanted to use Israel to harm them. So they transformed what was, in fact, a religious war by the Arabs against the Jews into a war of national liberation, because they calculated that a religious war would not get any traction in the West, because religion and fighting for religion is unfashionable in the West and was then. But a war of national liberation, along the lines that they created in many other different parts of the world, would have traction and did have traction. And so they created the Palestinian people. There was no such thing as the Palestinian people before the mid-60s. There were Arab populations in what was previously known as the Palestinian Mandate under British control, but they didn't take on a Palestinian identity. They considered themselves Arabs, but it was given to them, this identity, by the Soviet Union. In Moscow, the Palestinian National Charter was written. Yasser Arafat was appointed and maintained in power by the Soviet Union in charge of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Mahmoud Abbas was baptized as his successor. And both of them, in fact, both Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas were KGB assets under the Soviet Union. And all of the chants you hear on university campuses today, I don't know about here in Hungary, but certainly in the UK and the United States, other European countries, you'll get from the river to the sea, you'll get genocide, you'll get apartheid, and all this stuff, illegal. So all of this comes from the Soviet Union. So students today and the United Nations, other organizations who are chanting these lies against Israel, they're parroting propaganda developed in the Soviet Union. And so because of this, if an ordinary decent person understands that Israel stole land from the Palestinians, from the Arabs, illegally settled, practices apartheid, practices genocide, if an ordinary decent person like you or me hears that, you would be horrified if you believe it. And you would say, as the world, so much of the world says, anything that happens to Israel, it had it coming, including the 7th of October. Anything Israel does to defend this despicable regime that it's running is in the wrong. And that's the start point. That's the narrative that that explains the international actions, hatred, campaign against Israel.
It's like the pro-Palestine movement is banned here in Hungary. So I heard like that from the river to the sea first in Frankfurt, Germany, but it was sung not by Germans. So you mentioned that basically the West plays from the Soviet playbook. Why? I cannot understand this. That can't we like step forward from that area of?
It took hold.
Mm.
And it was probably the most successful of the Soviet propaganda or political warfare campaigns that was ever carried out. And you know, the Soviet Union obviously is now dead, but its legacy lives on in the campaign against Israel. So, you know,
and in the Western universities as well.
Sorry?
And in the Western universities.
Yeah, in Western in so many different elements of Western culture. I'm pleased to hear it doesn't apply here in Hungary, but it certainly applies in the UK. And once something like that has taken hold, it's very, very hard to shift. People, a lot of the, in fact, all of the anti-Israel narrative is not based on facts, but facts don't matter, feelings matter. And people feel that Israel is a uniquely evil country. Not everybody, but many people feel that. This entire narrative is constantly renewed, and everything Israel does is turned against it and distorted, whether it's fighting war in Gaza, whether it's hunger in Gaza, whatever it is, all turned on Israel. And the campaign, as we've seen since 2023, has just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And the few people that actively oppose it, their voices are very often drowned out by the huge number that are driving the narrative. But I think if you look at, if you take the UK as an example, I think the people, the anti-Israel elements in the UK are the minority. If you looked at the media, you'd think they were by far the majority, probably everyone, but it's not true. I think they're in the minority. And they're made up and driven by basically three different types of people. One is the hard left electorate, which is not only opposed to Israel, but is opposed to the West, to Western values, which Israel in many ways epitomizes.
It's kind of the self-hatred.
So, absolutely. There's Britain. I mean, when I was at school many years ago now, I was taught to hate Britain, our imperial past, our involvement in slavery, all of this. Back then, this is back in the 1970s.
Wow.
You can imagine how that has accelerated over time. And that's a big part of it. And it's driven predominantly by the left. And then you have the Islamic populations in the UK, which are growing and which are, I think, you'll obviously find some Muslims who do not follow the line, but I would say the vast majority of Muslims are anti-Israel. And finally, you've got a lot of, for want of a better word, ignorant people who know nothing about the situation, but they listen to organizations like the BBC and Sky News and read The Guardian in the UK, which is a left-leaning newspaper. And they get the propaganda. They get the anti-Israel, hugely biased propaganda against Israel. And they know nothing, so they believe it. There's very few voices saying the opposite of it. So you've got a combination of those three groups of people who form the core of the anti-Israel movement. And they're the noisy ones, the ordinary, decent people who have got any clue about the Middle East, which is probably not a huge number that actually are interested in the Middle East. They're more interested in playing football or earning money for their families or, all the rest of it, going on holiday, quite understandably, know nothing about it. And by and large, the people who do understand the reality or have an inkling of the reality are not the kind of people that get out on the streets and protest, would say take part in a counter demonstration against the anti-Israel mobs. So you get the picture. You get a picture of a country that is strongly anti-Israel. And it's not just the kind of picture we all get, but it's a picture that drives the political policies and the policies of the British government against Israel, which have, since the new Labour government has come into office last year, they have turned on Israel. And they've turned on Israel predominantly not because of the reality, because they understand the reality. These people do have the facts, but because they want to appease the members of their electorate who are anti-Israel.
Yeah, I'm so proud to be Hungarian because maybe earlier this year, Viktor Orban invited Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm just so proud that we were the first European countries to invite him. He had like the ICC against Netanyahu, but we invited. And this podcast does not found by the Hungarian government. Let's back to the war. Can Israel win this war? Because it's like going for almost 2 years. And Israel definitely made achievements in this war, or the war against Hezbollah or Iran. But can they win this war?
In Gaza?
Yeah.
Yes, they absolutely can win the war. They have decimated Hamas. Hamas, I believe, is on its last legs. It still has quite a number of fighters. Many of them are replacements for those who were killed. Huge number have been killed. and those replacements, by and large, are not as capable as the ones that were killed, but they're still capable of causing damage and harm. And indeed, very rarely does a good day go by when an Israeli soldier is not killed or wounded in Gaza, and sometimes in significant numbers. So, but as long as Israel keeps on the attack, then it can get rid of Hamas, and it has to get rid of Hamas. Hamas cannot be allowed to maintain control of Gaza. And it's unlikely they're going to voluntarily give up control of Gaza. So the only other solution to that is to destroy them, or destroy them to the degree where the others don't want to fight anymore. There is, and that is a possibility, there's no question, but there is one other option which I think is being considered, which is for Hamas, the leadership of Hamas anyway, to be exiled from Gaza into a country that is willing to take them. And that, I believe, is the possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's another possibility, which would, I think, be a turning point in the war. But the key is two things. One is to wrest control of Gaza from Hamas by killing most of them, and the other is to deny Hamas the ability to, the remnants of Hamas, the ability to control the population, which can be done. The primary weapon for doing that at the moment is humanitarian aid, which Hamas exploits for their own benefit and to control the population. And the more that's done to take that control away from them, the more likely they are to be defeated. And Israel or the United States actually, has set up an organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which aims to deliver aid to the people of Gaza without allowing it to fall into the hands of Hamas. And that has been remarkably successful so far. I visited 2 of their sites in the last few weeks, and I saw with my own eyes, how that works and what the effectiveness is.
Richard Kemp, thanks a lot for being available for us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.